Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Care Day week. And thank you all for tuning in to our accommodation webinar. My name is Danielle McGarry, and I sit on the Epic Youth Council, and I am emceeing this webinar today because accommodation is something that sits very close to my heart, and it is an important issue to me as a care leaver. I want to help raise awareness about issues facing care leavers and young people around accommodation. Well, Care Day is also about celebrating the voices of children and young people in care and professionals who work so hard supporting them in their placements on accommodation. And today we hope to highlight and celebrate both. Before we begin, I want to tell you how you can get involved in our webinar. So there will be a Q&A box at the bottom, and you can leave questions and through, or there will be a live panelist at the end, and we will answer your questions live. I'd like to welcome our panelists today. They will be Mr. William McNamara, who's the National Liaison Lead for Aftercare Service with TUSLA, Mr. Pat Doyle, who is CEO of the Peter McVerry Trust, Mr. John Murphy, EPIC's Research Officer and Advocate, Ms. Aisling Bruen, who is a fellow care leaver, social care team leader and housing activist. And I will also be joining the panelists for any questions you may have. Coming up in our webinar, we have presentations from the Ombudsperson for Children, Dr Niall Muldoon, a discussion piece on CAS, Capital Assistance Scheme, Housing for Care Leavers, an EPIC research piece undertaken with children's residential care centres across Ireland during the first COVID lockdown, a recorded panel piece between some of EPIC's Youth Council members and professionals discussing the issue care leavers can face around accommodation. And in between these presentations, we have some creative, informative pieces to show you and shared by our EPIC Youth Council, Daffodil Care Residential Services, children and young people from Orchard Fostering Services and the Smiley Trust. I'd now like to start our webinar with some highlights from a recorded presentation from our Ombudsperson for Children, Dr Niall Muldoon. Dr Muldoon is Ireland's second Ombudsperson for Children and was appointed by President Michael D. Higgins in February 2015. Niall's background is as a clinical psychologist, and he worked in the area of child protection for almost 20 years. In his presentation, Dr Muldoon outlines the submission that his office made in July last year to the UN Child's Rights Committee, outlining a question to ask the state in relation to children's rights in Ireland. And here Niall explores these issues concerning the suitability of children in care placements, children in care outside the state, young people in direct provision, and children in homeless accommodation.
Hi, absolutely delighted to be here and to celebrate Care Day 2021. Today I want to just tell you a little bit about the Ombudsman for Children's Office and the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and also talk to you about some of the issues that we put forward to the committee that are looking into Ireland's report on children's rights in 2022. We start off just telling you a little bit about the office. The Ombudsman for Children's Office is an independent statutory body, which means that we were set up in order to oversee the actions of the government and public services in relation to children. So anywhere that the government provides services for children, we have a right to oversee it and to look at how they're doing, to take complaints and to look at the rights that are being upheld. We were established in 2004 under the 2002 Ombudsman for Children Act, and we have two main functions. One is to examine and investigate complaints, which happens with maybe 1,700 complaints a year, and then also promoting children's rights and welfare in general. Now, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, many of you will know, was established in 1989. It was where countries of the world came together and provided and agreed on the rights that children have, no matter what country they're in, where they're from, what their age are, what their denomination is. Every child in the world, and there's only one country in the world that hasn't signed up to this convention, and that's America. It was ratified by Ireland in 1992. And every 5 years, the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child will look at Ireland's record in children's rights to see how they've done, what they've improved on, where the gaps are still there. The next review of that is due in 2022. So we made a submission in July of 2020 around this, and I'm just going to go through a little bit about these in relation to children in care. So we looked at first the children in alternative care, which is number 16 in the lists, and our concerns that we put to the committee were that we were concerned about the lack of consideration of best interests and the view of the children when they're put into care and when they have input around their own care. Make sure the government ensures availability and suitability of care placements. So they need to broaden the availability, and they need to address the needs of children with disability and mental health needs within care, alternative care. And that's a crucial part for me, because I think you're vulnerable already in care, but with those extra issues, we really need to make sure that we as locus parentis, the state has to step up to the mark. The next area that we looked at was children in care outside of the state. And our concerns for this is that as of 2020, my understanding there was about 21 children out in care of the state being looked after outside of Ireland. Most of them were in the UK, and there was one in mainland Europe. From our point of view, it shows a real absence of specialised care for children in Ireland, and something we need to step up to the plate on. There's a real lack of information on the impact of those placements abroad. We also have a lack of information on selection and monitoring of those placements. So how do we know where we're going, where the good placements are? And those are concerns we've had for a long time, and I think it's time for Ireland to really step up and do something about that. So our suggestions to the committee was that they provide information to us or through the state on the efforts that the state have made to develop and secure services in Ireland. They need to ensure placements abroad meet children's needs and uphold their rights. So again, it's understanding who's got the clinical responsibility and who's got the legal responsibility for children, and clarify the monitoring of placements abroad so that there is some degree of standardisation and understanding that the government are placing the children in a safe space. The next area, and I know this EPIC have been really strong on this as well, there are concerns around aftercare, and how oftentimes that excludes a certain group of children, children who maybe are in care for less than 12 months before they turn 18, or who have experienced homelessness and received TUSLA services but have not been formally in care. So there's a group of children there that really need the aftercare and aren't getting it. We're looking at the interagency cooperation for children with disabilities in this circumstance as well. So again, HSE and TUSLA working together or not working together up until now, but hopefully there will be improvements on that. And we're also concerned about separated children placed in direct provision. So we know that children come in who are unaccompanied from war-torn areas, traumatic backgrounds. They go into foster care as soon as they get here. They're sort of 14, 15. But once they turn 18, they're immediately moved to a direct provision centre if they haven't got status, and they could interact then with adults within direct provision centres. And that's a real traumatic change for them and something we need to look at. So we suggested to the committee that they ask the state to give us information on the adequate preparation and availability of supports for these children. And again, it's this idea that we have enough time to plan. We know most children are in care before they're 16, so you've got at least 2 years to plan for it. We need to ensure children with disabilities remain with foster families or transition to appropriate social care accommodations within as smooth a fashion as possible, and the state mitigate challenges for separated children going into direct provision, and that's a crucial thing from our point of view. The next piece that we looked at was care of children presenting as homeless. From our point of view, there's a use of unsuitable emergency accommodation. It's just not allowed anymore. We can't. It's so inappropriate. It often adds to the trauma for children who are homeless. What we need now is a well-staffed, well-resourced, 24/7 accommodation service for children who find themselves in that situation. We know that there's difficulty for children who have to leave the services during the day. It leaves them vulnerable to criminal elements and to other issues, and that could be risky for their life. We also know that there's an exclusion from aftercare for many of the children in the circumstance, and we talked about that earlier. So again, it's a really key part for us, and we asked the committee then to make sure that the state provides information on how they're going to address the root causes of homelessness. So again, prevention is better than cure. ensure provision of appropriate accommodation support, so we make those homeless accommodation as high quality as possible with the right level of staffing and the good quality support 24/7, and ensure the time in emergency accommodation is limited, again, to make sure that the children are moving back to a more appropriate setting. And finally, ensure the children move to suitable and sustainable placements. So again, it's not just getting out of emergency accommodation to a placement that might collapse within a month. It's moving to something that's suitable and sustainable. So those were the 4 areas we looked at, and the 4 areas that we made our submissions to the committee. We did that in July, and the committee then came back. So what did they come back, and what did they agree with us on, and what are they going to ask the government about? Essentially, they asked, they've agreed with us, and they've asked for information on the following. They're going to look at the needs assessment, the planning, the reviews and record keeping. So again, ensuring that we really have a good care system in place and that's really monitored properly. Ensure the availability of appropriate placements. So the government will have to answer that question. Have we got enough? Are they in the right places? Are they well staffed, and is everybody supported properly in that regard? They're going to ask the government about addressing the needs of children in care with disabilities and mental health needs. So again, that really difficult cohort who need extra support while they're in care. And they're asking about allocating social workers and aftercare services to all children in care. So again, it's upping our game and trying to provide the best possible service in a really positive social environment, and then integrating best interests as a primary consideration in all alternative care. So again, putting children's rights at the heart of the decision making for public services. We asked them to give us more information and data, because again, data is crucial for us in regards to how we understand and plan for the future. So what's the story with residential care? How much information do we have about family and community-based care? The care outside the state, emergency accommodation, single isolation, special care units. So again, if you record that data, then you can learn from it and plan for the future. And we also want to know with this information, what the gender of the people are, the ethnic origin, the national origin, the type of disability that might be involved, the geographical location. So again, proper in-depth data is going to be crucial for us into the future in planning. And from my point of view, I'm delighted to get those to know that the government are going to have to answer those questions to the committee. My understanding is they will be sending back a report on that next year, and then the committee will call them in front of them and challenge them on some of the replies and the responses. I will have an opportunity to engage with the committee at that stage as well. So from my point of view, I'll be pushing very, very hard to improve the standards of children's care throughout the various aspects of it. And I look forward to doing that next year and seeing what the government's response is. Okay, and I really want to just wrap up by saying a warm thank you to EPIC for the invitation to be involved today, and to say congratulations on building up Care Day to such a big event. You should be really, really proud of it. I'm delighted to have been involved for the last few years, and where it's grown to now is fantastic, because we all know that the importance of being showing the positive side of care gives a chance for those thousands and thousands of children to really blossom, and to recognise how important it is to be looked after in that way. So I hope Care Day is a great event for all of you, and thank you again for the invitation.
Hello again, and I just want to thank our Ombudsperson for Children, Dr Niall Muldoon, for his presentation to our webinar and his continued support to Care Day each year. Do check out his full presentation on the EPIC's YouTube channel today. I would now like to introduce a short animation piece created by members of the EPIC Youth Council in Cork, exploring how important the right placement is for a young person in care, and asking you to put yourself in my shoes. This piece and similar pieces are also available to you on the EPIC's YouTube channel today. an interview which I took part in with Mr. William McNamara, who is the National Liaison Lead for Aftercare Service with TUSLA, and Mr. Pat Doyle, who is the CEO of the Peter McVerry Trust. William has 30 years of social care experience and has worked within and on behalf of TUSLA in the area of aftercare services for the past decade. And Pat was appointed CEO of Peter McVerry Trust in late 2005 and has over 30 years experience in the community and voluntary sector. In this piece, we discussed the Capital Assistance Scheme Accommodation, CAS, which thanks to a number of dedicated champions now includes housing options for some young people leaving state care. I really enjoyed meeting both men and seeing their passion firsthand for supporting young people leaving care who are needing a safe and secure housing, and I could have chatted to them for hours. So here are the highlights. Thanks again for giving up your time, and obviously because we're on Zoom and stuff, there might be a few technical issues, but we'll try power through as much as we can. So I'm just going to jump straight into it. So what does CAS stand for and how did it come about?
I'll take that one to start with, just to say that CAS stands for the Capital Assistance Scheme, and it's a government funded programme to support approved housing bodies like the Peter McVerry Trust, Focus Ireland, Don Bosco, so on. There's lots of them. That scheme is there to support them with a capital funding to buy units under a scheme. So it's a capital assistance. It assists us to buy units under a scheme, and it's very recently, in the last couple of years, has been opened up the scheme for to allow the funding to be used to buy units for care leavers.
A document that came out called Better Outcomes, Brighter Futures, and it was a cross-government document. That was in 2014. So it sets out a government's commitments for children and young people up to the age of 24. So now that document was up to 2020, but it's important because that document is under review now by the Department Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth. So there's going to be a successor document to that in the near future, but it's really kind of grounds where, in terms of care leavers and children in care, that's kind of where the initial kind of discussions happened and what we started to do, Danielle.
That's amazing. So then the second question is, who is eligible for a CAS home?
There's 2,900 young people availing of aftercare services today. Okay, about 450 to 530-ish leave care annually each year. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Roughly about, Pat spoke about this, and roughly about 10 or 11% of that, about 50 per year, would be eligible or kind of would be suitable for a CAS accommodation for care leavers property. So it's important to note though, the majority of young adults who leave care each year do so with secure, stable accommodation, whether they're still remain with their foster carers, whether they moving on to independent living, returning to live with families. So the majority do. But there is, for a number of care leavers, there is those types of accommodation are unavailable due to the additional supports that they might need, and that was very much. And it could be just at a specific time in their life, on their pathway, on their journey to independent living and having a place of their own. It's really important to say, without a stable place to call home, these young people were particularly vulnerable to homelessness or at risk of homelessness and have difficulty in accessing continuous or consistent support. So there was a cohort there that we knew that needed additional support. Legislation coming in for aftercare, as we know there, it commenced in 2017. So in preparation for that, we were submitting, and accommodation was a piece of that. Now, TUSLA is not a housing provider, but there's a commitment to support our young people to secure stable accommodation. That's everything. You know what I mean? Life in many instances only commences with that. Absolutely, Danielle.
So then, is CAS available nationwide?
It was launched initially. It wasn't available across the country because you had to have a referral point of an interagency steering committee. So jumping to now, It's available across the country in all TUSLA areas. We've dedicated teams in every TUSLA areas. We've managers in every area now since January, February last year. So it is available now right across the country and within 31 county councils, city councils as well.
That's amazing that they're growing like so much. Like, so then, Pat, this one's for you. Can you tell me about the Peter McVerry Trust and your involvement?
I can, yeah, and thanks, Danielle, for the opportunity to do that. I suppose we've been involved in children's residential care for over 40 years. Last year we celebrated our 40th anniversary. Michael D. Higgins was on RT News, came down to Tabor House, which was our oldest unit. So we've got about 5 residential homes across Dublin. We have a number of aftercare services across Wicklow, Kildare and Dublin. And then we lobbied, like William mentioned, we lobbied to be part of this. We lobbied for CAS to be opened up to care leavers. It's been available to other groups, and we felt there was no reason why it shouldn't. And so, but it needed, as William said, the structures to get in place and the area committees. We're now operating CAS in 9 counties. So we're in the 4 local authorities in Dublin. We're in Longford, Westmeath, Kildare, and you know we have plans for other local authorities now. We actually operate now in 28 local authorities, but we're not yet offering CAS for care leavers in all those counties yet. So what we're currently doing is liaising with the area committees, the county committees, as William talked about, the aftercare steering committees. And we have a bit more work to do with that to respond. But like Longford, for example, we never had a service in Longford, but the aftercare manager there reached out to us. The same in Westmeath, and they were the first ones we got outside of Dublin. And then since then, we've gone into Kildare as well. So at the moment, there are about 90 units, and there's about 70 in operation. And the trust has 22 of them, and six more in the pipeline. So we have 28 contracts signed. We have 22 operational, and the other 6 are just being finalised at the moment and assigned. But we have a target this year to grow that, and I can tell you about that later on. But we're delighted to be involved in the scheme. We just want to see it grow now. We want to do our bit to grow it as well.
That's amazing that you like just keep expanding on both sides. Like, so then who decides how a CAS property will be allocated to a young person?
Yeah, how that works, and just picking up on the point there, like the CAS program has for care leavers, it has many moving parts. There's many organisations and players involved, like you have local authorities, you have TUSLA, you have the approved housing bodies, you have estate agents, you have the interagency steering committees where you would have mental health, disability, community, primary care, everything. Every steering committee got to have that planning piece. We do nationally, we do a forecast every 2 years. So for instance, with just the present forecast 2020-2021 is we've identified 321 young people who may be suitable for CADs and need those additional supports to progress to long-term stable accommodation. But I suppose who's eligible really comes down to the local aftercare teams and the aftercare managers, where they will identify locally within their and they would, where a young person is under the assessment of need piece, where it's deemed that a CAS property may be suitable for this young person following the transitional period, because you don't go into a CAS property at 18. It's really there needs to be a transition and planning period before that. So it's around 19 and a half, 20 by probably, with the exception maybe of a mother and child or parent and child and things like that. That might be the exception. But so that's where it would go on the assessment of need. It then if it's deemed that that's a place that goes to the point of referral to the Interagency Steering Committee, where the planning for that CAS property occurs. And so the CAS would be in that. With that transitional piece, the CAS property would be ready at a particular point in time for the young person there. So that's the way it is. So when the HB would be sitting, TUSLA would contact the HB that's linked to that area then to say, look, we have a young person here that's suitable for, we think suitable for a CAS for care leaves accommodation. Could you go and have a look, see if there's any properties? So they go on and look to find a suitable property. And there's principles within the scheme for these properties, like they need to be in, you know, areas that may not have a high, may not have high social issues, or they need to be peppered, what we call peppered, that they're not all congregate together. They, you know, there's links to community buses, colleges. So there's principles in there. But so once the registered AHB, such as Peter McVerry Trust, Focus Ireland, and Don Bosco are the present AHBs in the acquisitions at present. There's 17 AHBs involved, the 3 in terms of acquisitions there at the moment. So they would come back, and they may have, say, for instance, 3 or 4 identified properties. So between the Interagency Steering Committee, the aftercare teams, and the HB to decide which is the most suitable property at that point. So that's the process in terms of how who's eligible and what would happen. So the most important part at that point then is when it's, although late in the process, the young person may not be involved up to that point, because you don't want an expectation, because properties can fall through for various reasons. And there's a lot of things can happen. So you don't want to have that expectation. And young people may get frustrated at that, how long it takes, but there is a, you know, hopefully we can improve that. That's the process in terms of eligibility.
So then how is a young person supported when moving into their CAS home?
Well, I'll take that if I can. I mean, where possible, we try to get the young person to visit the property during the sale agreed, or and we've done that before, where we were buying 2 properties for 2 young people, and we let both of them visit the 2 properties. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, to see which one they would like. And one chose the one that we thought they would choose, and the other chose, one had more security concerns than the other, so they chose an upstairs elevated property, and the other was a smoker. So they chose a ground floor one where they had access to a small little garden. We kind of knew it would work out that way, but we wanted to let them put their fingerprint on it. Our housing team, the Trust has 650 housing units across Ireland and 340 almost in the pipeline. So we have a designated housing team. So they're linked with the housing officers. And if we can link them before they leave aftercare, that's what we do, so that they're beginning to develop a relationship. That doesn't always happen. It only happens with our own, and those leaving our own aftercare units or our own residential units, they get an opportunity. But where we can do it in other areas, we will as well. And so then, you know, the housing officers and the support team are there. There's a lot of support over the first few weeks, first few days, the first few weeks, moving in. As I said to you earlier, one young person said to me when I walked in, I knew him since he was 12. So it was a pleasure to see him get in his own unit. And I walked in, I was expecting a big, profound conversation. I said to him, well, what do you think? And he says to me, I don't know how to use the immersion pass, you know. And I says, right, let's have a look at it. Now, it was so modern, I didn't know how to use it either. So I said, we need to get the staff to look at that. But there's a lot of help around those things, you know, how to use the heating system, how to manage, you know, your ESB card, you know, these cards. You know, so all of that support is there for the young people. How to link in with the community, find the local library, the local gym. All those startup packs are there for people, and the staff are there. And then as people settle, that support is pulled back to a point that's comfortable for both sides. And then it's down to kind of, you know, check-ins and kind of just online support. Everybody moving into Peter McVerry Trust gets a fridge magnet with our out-of-hours online number. So there's always somebody on call, always somebody available. And, you know, After all that stuff is sorted, the big challenge for people is learning to live with the isolation and loneliness of living on your own. And we've all found that. The first time I moved in on my own, I was thinking I made a mistake. You know, and it's learning to live with that and having a contact and having the support. But the supports are there as long as people want them. And everybody in the Peter McVerry Trust, whether you come from care or whether you come from adult homelessness or from treatment, the care and support is there as long as you want it.
I suppose the support sides from within the scheme, the support sides from within the scheme itself is, you know, it's laid out as you have the approved housing bodies are the social landlords of the units. You know, they would be there. They would have housing officers. Like Peter McVerry Trust would have a number of housing officers, but the support in terms of from the TUSLA perspective would be, you know, the interagency steering committees that work and the aftercare service and the aftercare worker. All young people who are eligible for a CAS home are eligible have to be assigned an aftercare worker, because that's part of the support package. Yeah. So from TUSLA perspective, it's up to 21 if they're not in education, up to 23 if they are. So, but the interagency steering committees have to go back to that. That's the important planning piece, but for whatever is required in terms of supports, respecting the young people's privacy and politics, because it's up to themselves in terms of what they want and when they want it. Like, the feedback is help is there when we need it, you know, so it's the young person themselves, the young adult will come and say, but the connections to that local community are important and the services that are available. So it's 21 and 23 as far as TUSLA is concerned, but there is drop-in services after that from TUSLA that, regardless of age, a young person can access those services for support as well, or signposting and things like that.
And then is a CAS home for life?
That's the really good thing about it. It is for life. And you know, one of the biggest things that young people say to us in the feedback is, you know, how do you feel? I feel I have security now. I have safety. I have security. Yeah. I can shut my own door and I don't have to worry about where I'm going to be next week or next month. And that's the difference of that and living in private rented. Private rented, we've all lived in private rented, and it works for a certain amount of time in your life. But you're not fully in control of the fact that the landlord may sell the property from under you. Yeah. A CAS property is assigned to an approved housing body, and they can't sell that property. They can only transfer it to another approved housing body, but they must transfer the tenant with them. So the Peter McVerry Trust went bust tomorrow, and you know, Don Bosco's or somebody else would be taking over our properties. That's the way it works. So the young person has the security of having a tenancy for life. Now, if they, you know, if they get into a relationship and have children and everything else, they have the same rights as any local authority tenant. So they can apply for a transfer under that. And the Peter McVerry Trust has given transfers to people where they needed a 2-bed or they needed a 3-bed, you know, or where two young people met in care and came together, or met somewhere else in college and came together and decided to make a go of it. Then they can apply for transfer. The waiting list for transfers are the same as any local authority list. It doesn't happen overnight. Yeah. But you can apply. It's a formal procedure. And when a 2-bed comes up, or a 3-bed, whatever the need might be, you will get that. But your tenancy is for life. So as long as you abide by the tenancy rules, pay your rent, put out your bins, don't have a horse in your garden, all the things that would happen in a local authority housing estate that you're not allowed to do, and you are allowed to do. As long as you do and abide by all of them, then your tenancy is for life. And that's the really good thing, because, you know, sometimes for some young people, being in care is the first time in a while where they've had security, and that they don't want to lose that security when they leave care. So having a CAS tenancy is just fantastic that way.
I know from my own experience, obviously being a care leaver, and I've had my own experiences, like when I got my home for life, like I was like, I'm paying my rent on time, I'm paying all my bills on time, even like I'm still in my my apartment now 3 years, and I'm always in credit with my bills. It's just to have that sense of security, like, so that I know I'm in credit with this, I'm in credit with that, so that if I do have an off week, like I know I'm not going to be stung for that bill, like, you know. So I understand completely, like.
Exactly. I know it's not a question. I know you haven't asked a question, but if I can, just for your listeners, you indicated you were working away there at the beginning of the interview. If you lost your job tomorrow, touch wood, you don't, and your income levels changed, then under the CAS rules, your rent changes with that. So the rent can only be a proportion of your income. So for any young person listening to to this and thinks, well, I don't have a job, how am I going to pay? It's a proportion of whatever you have. So if you're on social welfare, it's a percentage of that. If you're working, it's a percentage of that. But it's capped all the time to make sure that it's affordable for you. So as you said, you can put it away and not get into trouble with your rent.
Yeah, like it's all assessed on your income and stuff.
Correct. Yeah.
So then, how many young people have benefited from CAS housing?
Okay.
Big numbers, I hope.
Yeah, we're delighted so far in terms of, but we want, as Pat said earlier, we want more, Pat, don't we? Like all of us want more. We all want to get more. But what we have, so we have I keep an eye on the activity with the HBs, and we work together and we keep just tracking it because we want to see how it's going and check in with their people in CAS properties to make sure, because there's hiccups along the way, and we want to try and make it better. I can touch on that later. So I suppose as of the end of December, we have 60 young people in their CAS properties. Okay, at the moment. Now I mentioned earlier we had 205 identified properties across the country earlier. So we have 60 after almost 3 years of the scheme. But there was always a long lead in to this. Like our first young person got in the property. Oh, there was big celebrations that day, I have to say, when the first young people got in. I said, will we ever get one in? Because it was taking a while. But as Pat said, there is complications there to get there. So in May 2018, through Don Bosco had the first birth. We all celebrated that day to say, thank God we have one young person in there. And so this will be the start of more young people starting to move in, because it takes time. So we have 60 at the moment, and there's 70 properties fully acquired, which means there's 10 young people in transition to their property at this point. And there's 93 properties active, but those, they're either sale agreed and things like that. So they might fall through or they might not. You know,
all
they might
background work and stuff.
But we have identified in the forecast I mentioned 321. See, the thing about this is the funding is there for those young people through the housing. So we have the funding. The funding is not the issue at all. It's to try and get the properties within the housing market, which is a challenge. You know, particularly one-bedroom properties, which is really the most suitable in many instances. Myself and Pat spoke at length on that yesterday even. So we have a forecast. So the funding is there, and yes, there's caps on units in certain county councils and things like that. But in Dublin, in DCC, for instance, it said keep going until you're told otherwise. So there's no cap there. So the challenge is to find the properties. So that's where we are in terms of numbers. But we're delighted, but we want more.
That's amazing. At least they keep pushing for like more houses and more properties and stuff. It's amazing to hear. So then, what has been the feedback from young people in CAS?
Yeah, the feedback. I know, Pat, you have some feedback there. We both have, you know, and we did. We just wanted. I mentioned earlier we wanted to check in with young people how they were getting on. So we did a kind of a questionnaire out to the young people that were presently in CAS properties at that time. It was around June, July, August, September, October. So some of the feedback I have here, I can tell you now. We're also, just to mention, I want to get back to just to mention, there's UCD research as well, commissioned by Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth. That's presently out there across 11 areas. It was 8 and we've expanded it to 11. So they're talking to young people in terms of their experiences as well, but the purpose of that is how do we make this better and to make recommendations. So that will be published in the very near future as well, and there'll be a lot of feedback in that from the young people. But from the questionnaire, I know Pat has a couple there, but I'll just throw out a couple of them. like, I love reading these because these are quotes on quotes now. So I'll just read quickly, very quickly. It's very important because it's close to where I grew up. A safe place to live, that's nice. Somewhere to call home and where I can go to college from, unquote. So next one, quote, I finally feel safe. I have a place to call my own, to have headspace. It's mine. I don't have to answer to anybody. And no one can control me here. I can breathe, okay?
Very important, that.
Yeah, quote, because it's my apartment, I'm able to choose my own furnishings, make it homely and decorate it the way I wanted to. I feel a lot safer here too, unquote. Quote, I could read these all day now, but I'll try and, I know you probably edit this later, some of them, but I'm near the shops and post office, so I have it really handy. Buses are nearby and I've got myself a bike. I'm getting support from my aftercare worker and housing officer, which I did not have before. Having a home took a lot of pressure off me. I now sleep and eat better and I'm comfy and I can cook for myself, unquote. Quote, helped me move on in life and get started. Unquote. There are some of the quotes, but there's also, they're all very positives in terms of how they are, but we've looked at other things in terms of trying to make it better. Like some of them would, some care leaders would say that it's taking too long by the time they get there into their apartment or home. And others would say, look, which is very valid too as well, it's a daunting experience. So sometimes it takes that long, and the first time a young person may see their home is the day they turn up and see it. They're signing the contracts and they're getting the keys all within 1 hour. That's very, very daunting. You know what I mean? And we want to take all that into consideration as better. And Pat, I know you have a couple of feedback from your young people in.
I won't delay it now, just to say that I have 5 quotes here, but what's central going through them is the word stability and security. So almost everybody has said, it has given me stability and security. Another one, it has given me a sense of safety. So that sense of safety, having my own key to the door. Another one says it's provided me stability. It's meant that I can now focus on other things in life, such as education and training and employment. So what the key to the door does, it's one of your basic human needs. Once you have that shelter, then you can begin to look at other options. It's hard to look and consider other options when you don't know where you're going to be next, where you're going to lay your head. And I suppose it's a huge privilege for the Peter McVerry Trust to be involved in this. It's a core part of what we do. I'm 32 years in the sector this month, and I started in under 18s residential care. And to give a young person a key to the door, and to know now that opens up a whole new world for them. It gives them freedom, choice, have over who I want to have over, decorate the way I want to decorate, eat when I want to eat, do what I want to do. It's just fabulous sense of independence, knowing that support number is on the fridge. You can ring it day and night, only when you want to. But it's only up there along with the local pizza company's number as well. Important, and you can choose to ring whichever one you want to ring whenever you want to ring.
It's all about balance.
It's all about balance, and it is. I know William would agree. It's an absolute privilege. The challenge now for us is to multiply this and get it moving. Now, I met with the minister in the last week, and we've been working with the minister to ensure that in every new build scheme that's been funded by the states, no matter what shape or form, it's got to have 1 beds in them. So we don't need to only acquisition 1 beds under CAS. Any other approved housing body who's building under CAS can donate or open up a 1-bed unit or a 2-bed unit under CAS as well. So we need to grow the scheme now, grow the response, get all of those 17 providers that William talked about, get them now delivering CAS along with Don Bosco's, ourselves, and Focus Ireland. And if any of those other providers want support, William, or want guidance, then you can send them towards the 3 of us as well. But we need to ramp it up so that young people leaving care in any county who qualify can get access to the unit that they need to get access to in their local area. That would be a dream, you know.
Just want to say a big thank you to both of you for giving up your morning to come on and talk to me. You have both really like set the bar high in your organizations and like in the work you do. Like I don't think you understand how, like I'm speaking on my experience just as a care leaver, like how much like the work that both of you do and all the communication and all the background work, like it really does like help. Like it just gives us that like little burst of energy that like there is actually people out there that want to help and like that want to support us and stuff. Like, so it's absolutely amazing. Like, and it's been a pleasure talking to both of you this morning.
Likewise.
So just want to say thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Best of luck.
Just want to say a big massive thank you to William and Pat. And both have kindly made themselves available today to be part of our live Q&A panel at the end of this webinar. So do use the Q&A box for any questions that you may have on CAS. You can also check out that full interview on EPIC's YouTube channel today. Next up, we have a short presentation from EPIC's Research Officer and Advocate in our Cork office, Mr. John Murphy. At the beginning of the first COVID lockdown, John undertook a research piece called COVID-19, a moment in time for children's residential care services in Ireland, looking at the challenges for children and staff as a result of the COVID-19 restrictions. John has worked with EPIC since September 2012 and as an advocate officer, and over the last 2 years combined his work with research. A copy of John's full findings can be found on the EPIC's webpage, and John is available for any questions during our live Q&A panel at the end of the webinar.
Hello, my name is John Murphy and I'm an Advocacy and Research Officer with EPIC. Around this time last year, March of last year, when the first lockdown came, we decided that it would be a good idea to contact the residential centres and to see how they were getting on. And the main rationale around that was to see, just to check in with them, see how they're doing, see what challenges the young people were having in the centres at the time, to determine if there was any issues for the staff and management, and also to look to see if work practices had changed during their time there as well, and to try and just give them any extra supports if they needed. So it was a survey that we sent out. It was pretty basic. We broke it down into 4 major questions. The first part looked at the issues for the young people. The second part would have been looking at the issues around what the staff were going through at that stage. And the third part would be what extra supports they would have needed at that stage. And then the fourth and final part was just any other issues that would have been there. The first part, the impact on the young people, we broke down into 6 different areas: feelings of isolation, family access, disruption to education, social distancing, is there strained relationships with staff, or is there strained relationships with other residents as well. And thankfully, the results that came back were really, really positive at the time. Feelings of isolation, I think a lot of social media around helped that, and technology. And that was also the main issue around family access, that the managers and the staff were saying that people were using technology, having family contact that way. The one issue that did come up there was that of digital poverty. Disruption to education was actually the main issue that was coming up, where staff were saying they weren't qualified to work with the young people. They weren't school teachers. Trying to motivate the young people to get up and do something online or work with the children that way was very, very difficult for them. And they're saying as social care workers, it was kind of a dual role that they were doing at that stage. Thankfully, no major issue around social distancing or relationships with other residents or staff. Some other issues that were coming up then was anxiety within the young people themselves, that they will contract COVID, or that some of their family will be as well. And again, the difficulties that they were having around their education placements. Most of the difficulties that the staff said were experiencing was, again, the fear of bringing COVID into the house and the implications that that would have, not just for themselves, but also for the house as a whole and the young people that were there. Motivation for schooling, as I already mentioned, the time issues and how to be creative to ensure that the day was kind of passing as quickly as possible and that people weren't getting bored. The impact on their work practices was adhering to the guidelines from the HSE, organising the goals and expectations of the young people, making sure that, you know, too much wasn't expected of those. Briefly, the extra supports that they were looking for was additional PPE. At that stage, the surveys were done around at the end of March and with the month of April. That wasn't fully there at that stage. More communication from TUSLA was asked for at that stage, which thankfully came on board shortly after the results as well. And mental health supports, not just for the young people, but for staff as well. Staff were worried because they were just going from work, or the management were worried because they were just going from work to home, to work to home, so there's no real breaks for them at that stage. Then the other comments were some more access to social media, the health and safety issues, the digital isolation was the big one. And then just in a summary of the major findings of it was again that the piece of education needs to be looked at. Family access certainly needed to be looked at as well, you know, to try and organise something for the young people, even if it was ensuring that all parents or all children had some way of having digital technology, and the fear then of staff burnout. So that was just in brief what I did there towards the end of last year. It's available on our website at this stage, and if you have any further questions, just let us know. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you to John for his presentation. And keeping in line with residential care, I want to introduce a short video by Sarah Gallagher, who is a Deputy Manager at one of Daffodil Care Children's Residential Centres. In this video, Sarah shows us a memory and comfort box that their houses put together for young people in care, for them to have when they move on or age into aftercare. Memory and comfort boxes are created by so many providers and agencies for children in care, and these memories are so important for young people to have as they get older.
Hi, my name is Sarah Gallagher. I am the Deputy Manager here of one of the centres here within Daffodil Care Services, and I'm here today to talk to you about our comfort boxes and our memory boxes. I suppose why we do these boxes initially is to instill a sense of belonging for the young people within our centre. I suppose a lot of young people are coming from diverse backgrounds and different care placements, and we want to, I suppose, celebrate different memories and experiences that young people will have here with different staff members. And I suppose to just have memories for them going forward of their time within Daffodil Care. Okay, so firstly, one of the things that we do here are scrapbooks. So for example, we can have something like this. You know, where you would have the day you were born, your family, your favorite foods, favorite songs. You know, we would have a few inspirational quotes and decorate it. Another thing that we would do is like a family tree. That's on the next page. We could have a family tree, and again another inspirational quote. And I suppose throughout the rest of the scrapbook, we would include like cinema stubs and different wristbands from places like Tayto Park, different days out or museums, things like that. And they can all be kept within like a scrapbook that can be placed in your memory box. So over here, we can include different items. Like this is another small memory box that we have here, and we can include different memorabilia, such as items that you would have had with that may have been got by a staff member on a day out, or you know, a little cuddly toy that was given by a staff member for their birthday. So these are just ideas that you can put in your memory box. Also, I suppose in this particular box here, as an example, we have our memory box, and we also have our comfort box. So we have some sensory items, and that, you know, some young people would love to have, so we keep them in here. They could have some books or word searches, and you know, maybe some meditation and colouring and relaxing, things like this. And I suppose like little little art pieces. We have face masks, and we may have some nails and things like this. So I suppose that's our comfort box and our memory box. Other items, I suppose, that you can include that I know had a really good effect with one young person I worked with, would have been, I suppose, writing down experiences or favourite memories that you've had with the young person and leaving them in the box for them to have when they're gone. And some young people who have left and taken these boxes with them, they have really, really been grateful to, I suppose, have different memorabilia of the different experiences they've had with different staff members. And it has been like a huge success, I suppose, in that young people are really happy taking this away with them. So I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you start doing it in your own centres. So thank you very much.
Thanks again to Sarah from Doyle Care Services for their lovely piece. And I just want to let you know that the Smiley Trust Services has also kindly provided a short video for us on the memory comfort boxes, and that they also put together for their young people moving on from their care. You can see that full video on Epic's YouTube channel today, with special thanks to Helen Bugle, the manager of Glen Silva's Residential Care Centre. I'd now like to introduce another recorded piece. Just before our latest lockdown, members of Epic's Youth Council, staff and professionals came together in a socially distanced environment to talk through the issues presented across all webinars this week. Here is a recorded panel piece discussion on accommodation between Angelika Majer, Dylan Nolan, two Epic Youth Council members, alongside Dr Niall Muldoon and Mr Damien Hernan, who is the interim director of Oberstown Children Detention Campus.
Hi, my name is Angel. I'm one of the Epic Youth Council members. Happy Care Day. Today we're going to be talking about the accommodation panel discussion. So I'm going to open it up saying that although there are a lot of challenges, there are supports out there in the aftercare system with accommodation, but mainly we're going to discuss the kind of challenges and obstacles for care leavers in accommodation. I'm going to ask you first about maybe some of the positives to do with aftercare accommodation for care leavers.
Okay, thank you, Angel. I suppose from our perspective on the Oberstown campus, lots of the young people are fortunate in that there's still a family involvement with them, so they still have a home to go to. In some circumstances where young people have come from the care system into the criminal justice system, it presents a different challenge then, because typically now young people leaving our campus could be 18 years plus, so they are now in competition with adults who may be homeless or in need of accommodation. So that presents a significant challenge. Where we try and meet that challenge, I suppose, is throughout our placement planning process with regard to mapping this out from a very early stage, that this is a requirement for this young person when they leave the campus. So I suppose we've made good moves, I suppose, in relation to that with external stakeholders and external partners. But every now and then there's still a fly in the ointment with a young person who may have accommodation difficulties, and that presents a real challenge, not for the campus or the organisation, but for the young person themselves, in terms of how am I going to move forward successfully in my life to maximise my potential. So it's in the main, lots of our young people do have accommodation, but in recent years, because the age bracket has changed, those who are leaving now who don't have accommodation are in competition with adults, and that presents a significant challenge from time to time. So that's how it is in our neck of the woods. Thank you.
Dylan, as a care leaver yourself, what has your experience been with accommodation?
So, I guess with my own accommodation piece was that, you know, it's same for a lot of people that would have came out of res care. It would have been, you go from your res care home straight into an aftercare accommodation. But that's kind of one of my big issues, is that usually with those aftercare accommodations, it's from 1 year to 3 years. And one of the points that I've always kind of made is that for a lot of people, that's only like putting on hold homelessness, or putting on hold housing insecurity. You know, we're in a housing crisis at the moment, and I think care leavers are affected even they're already impacted by finding houses. But you know, when we're all collectively in that crisis, it's like it's almost more impact on the care leavers, you know. But yeah, like I've always like I do have an issue with kind of like those time limited aftercare accommodations where when it comes to the end, you're almost like relying on friends. Hopefully, has a room or a couch, you know. But yeah.
Definitely. Have you had any experience in the private rental market or trying to get accommodation as a young adult in the city?
Yeah, well, I think for like most young people, you know, it is the only choices to kind of rent, especially in Dublin. And if anyone else wants to jump in, that's great. But it's like there's already that kind of discrimination already against young people. So when, say, if you are leaving care at 18 and you don't go into an aftercare accommodation, say there's too many, there's a long waiting list or something like that, like, and you have to go into that private rental, and you don't have any previous, like, you know, references, or you don't have any, you know, if you're still in school or something, you know, like that, like, you know, and then you kind of see landlords would be like, you know, we only take people that are in, you know, they're in college or they're in their careers, you know, and I think that's a direct impact on, you know, that isn't, if that they're not, that it's that transition at 18 is the issue, you know, because they don't have the resources to kind of go through that, like.
I think mainly if you look at young people in general, most of us don't actually leave home until we're in our late 20s or 30s. And as a care leaver, you turn 18 and all of a sudden you're thrown out into the world.
Yeah.
Niall, have you had any experience in relation to accommodation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the average age of young people leaving their family home is about 25 now. You know, so that gives you a huge set of experiences. It gives you a chance to build references. It gives you a chance to build financial security and probably job security as well. So as you say, if you're moving at 18 years of age, you are literally a fish out of water. You've no idea how to swim in this river, how to make it work. And even with supports, that's difficult. And even just simply on the basis of loneliness, or, you know, who do I know around here? Where can I go for certain things to support me? So, I mean, one of the things that we've been looking at is the possibility that in most of the British Isles, the support is up to, youth is considered up to 25 years of age. Psychologically and neurologically now we know that adolescence extends into the early 20s. Your brain isn't fully developed. So we're asking an awful lot of our 18-year-olds coming out of care. I mean, and if you're an 18-year-old coming out of a very secure family home, it still will be difficult. But coming out of care and perhaps, you know, without the support and the usual family grouping to help you along, it's a really big ask. So I think it's incumbent on the state to make sure that we make that transition as smooth as possible. We provide the appropriate accommodation. We provide it at a cost that's reasonable and doable for young people. And we also act as the referee into the future, so that when you do get to that stage of 21 and you have to move out, then your reference coming from whoever the care worker or whoever it might be is valid and useful, so that the landlords don't have that excuse to use against you. So I think there's a lot of things we can do, and we really need to do. We're behind time in doing that stuff, because a lot of the other countries in Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales are doing it much better at this stage.
Yeah. I know from my own personal experience as a care leaver trying to get accommodation, especially when you're a student as well, you're going out into the world trying to pay bills, trying to pay for travel to your college, and you're also trying to grow as a person and develop your skills to actually be able to live independently. Especially as a care leaver, you leave not knowing how to do your own washing or cooking, not knowing how to pay rent. And I think with the struggles of high rents and limited accommodation. Now, I know aftercare accommodation is available, but the long waiting lists, again, are an obstacle to care leavers. And I think even the kind of fear of becoming homeless and the rise of homelessness amongst care leavers is having a major impact. What do you think we can improve? How do you think we can actually tackle this issue?
I suppose from my point of view, the state needs to facilitate and plan ahead. Again, it's one of these things that we know, we've been hearing this for a number of years, and we can plan ahead. And as Damien says, you know, some young people will often end up in the justice system, and they don't need to be there if we planned ahead and supported our children, young people. Because the investment we put in now will prevent an awful lot of difficulty in the future, whether it's mental health, homelessness, addictions, justice issues. You know, so I think it's about grasping the here and now and saying, right, what have we learnt and what do we need to put in place to make this smoother and easier for the future, so those young people become better apprentices, better in college, the careers, and they become self-sufficient, and then we contribute back into the society, as opposed to trying to survive on the bare minimum and then ending up becoming a long-term burden on society. And that's where we need to get to, put those processes in place and those supports in place, so that you have accommodation, you have funding, you have support there. You know that you're working towards independence, but you also know that you can do that gradually over the course of a number of years. And when you become independent, you will be fully self-sufficient. That's the target. And that's what we owe to you. Because if you come into care, it's because we are becoming your parent as a state. We need to do that, as good parents do. And as I say, most parents are letting their children live with them until they're 25. And when they're 25, the child is ready to move out and be totally self-sufficient, with all those skills that you talk about, the cooking, the cleaning, the drying, the renting, the budgeting, the travel. All those sorts of things are then in place for that child to move out. And if we're going to be locus parentis as a state, we need to be the best parent we can be, and that's how you do it.
I like that you said investing in our futures and in us now, rather than, you know, putting it off and it becoming a bigger problem later on. Damien, what about yourself?
The concept of the emerging adult is something that the state and the nation really needs to grasp. Lots of us are fortunate enough to have been allowed to live with our parents into our 20s or whatever, and have had that stable environment that allows us to manage those different set of life skills that are required for independent living. The concept of community and network as well is really important from a care leaver's perspective, in that the roots that perhaps they've grown in a certain community are suddenly uplifted and are transferred or transformed into a different community or network, and that creates another layer of challenge for any person leaving care. So I think, to Niall's point, and it's similar in the justice world and the care world, the earlier the intervention, the earlier the funding and the needs-based assessment kicks in, the long-term problems should not occur. I think the capacity to figure out what's our end point. So somebody's going to leave care, somebody's going to leave the justice system at some point. So at that point in time, what needs to be in place? And the earlier we start to address that, the greater the chance we have of closing the gaps that develop when young people leave care. So I think we do have to get behind the emerging adult concept, and we do have to give that some value and some weight from a care perspective and also from a justice perspective. That's.
Can I just add also, just from the LGBT perspective, one thing that we had to make clear in our leaflets when we were making them, for whoever reads them, that like there are resources, because we were talking about that for accommodations, you know, if you are LGBT and leaving care, you might not feel safe going to go into that private rental market, or, you know, and we kind of we really tried to drive home that there were resources there for accommodation if you are LGBT. And I think just making more people aware that there are there are people to help with housing, there are people to help with this, but I also just wanted to add there at the end, that one thing that I've kind of found, and that I know there's a big thought process around it, that we need, because there are care leavers that leave care and they totally settle in so well where they go. And I think we need to kind of start looking at that and examining that, through a longitudinal study of what happens to care leavers after they leave care. What was there something that happened in that process of leaving care that that they settled in great, or didn't settle in great? I think that needs to kind of be addressed by the state.
A big thank you to Dr. Niall Muldoon, Damien Hernan, Dylan and Angel for that great piece. So as part of our Care Day celebrations, we asked children and young people in care and care leavers what helped them settle in to a new placement and what helped their placement feel like a home. We wish to thank all young people and adults who kindly shared their experiences for this piece, and we want to give a big shout out also to the children in Orchard Fostering Services for sharing their stories with us. Enjoy. I just want to say we also have a live panel piece, a live questionnaire coming up. So there is a comment box down below. So if you have any questions that you feel you need more information on, please drop them below and we will get back to you in the next section. As we near the end of our webinar, we'd just like to give you the opportunity to ask any questions you might have from any presentations today, or any comments you might like to add. I'd just like to remind you that you can find all recorded pieces up on the EPIC's YouTube channel as well, if you want to give that a look. And to remind you of our live Q&A panel, they are me, Mr. William McNamara, who is the National Liaison Lead for Aftercare Service within TUSLA, Mr. Pat Doyle, who's the CEO of the Peter McVerry Trust, Mr. John Murphy, EPIC's Research Officer and Advocate, Ms. Aisling Bruen, who is a fellow care leaver, social care team leader, and housing activist. And now our panel will be chaired by Ms. Adele Weldon, who is one of our advocates within EPIC.
Thanks, Danielle, and hello everyone, and I hope you're enjoying our webinar. I'm just going to jump straight in because you're not here to listen to me now, to be fair, but I'll go with some of the positives and all the feedback that we've got, and thank you so much for everybody who has sent on the feedback. So some people were commenting on the videos and how much they liked them, which is lovely to hear. And all those videos, as Danielle said, will be available on our EPIC YouTube channel by the end of the day. We got another nice comment from Sinead in regards to the comfort boxes that Daffodil Care kindly put together. In her service, she said they've recently introduced memory boxes as well, and they're getting amazing feedback for it. And she got really good ideas from Sarah's piece and will be adding those ideas to theirs. So that's lovely to hear as well. So now we will go to our questions, and Aisling, I'm going to go straight to you if that's okay. And I suppose it's a question that we haven't really had a chance to delve a huge amount into in our webinar, but Dylan and Angel both mentioned it in the recorded pieces, and it's the obstacles that young people can face when trying to rent in private accommodation. And just wondering, with your experience and expertise, what you feel those obstacles are.
Well, I guess, you know, we have to kind of touch on the state of private rented provision at the moment. And there's a lot of issues across the board in the private rented market, which would be, you know, the short-term nature and high tenancy turnovers. We've got overcrowding in particularly urban areas. We have really poor standards, again, concentrated to urban areas. People are being discriminated against in terms of accessing the housing assistance payment, and there's always a risk of eviction. There's always a risk of homelessness. And these key issues that I'm talking about, they affect unequally vulnerable cohorts. So you're talking about migrants, you're talking about single lone parents, travellers, precarious workers, the unemployed, and of course, care leavers. Care leavers moving from foster care to residential, from either foster care, residential into private accommodation. You know, they qualify for social housing, and through that then they can get the rent subsidy, such as the housing assistance payment would be like the predominant payment that young people are getting. Different county councils across Ireland, you know, have different caps or different limits on that housing assistance payment. In Dublin, it's €430. Now, there can be some discretion applied. It depends on whether you're on mainstream housing assistance payment or homeless housing assistance payment, but those discretions can be either 20% or 50%. But even still with those discretions, the HAP caps actually don't meet the market. You're talking for a room in Dublin, you could be talking about €700-800, you know. So already young people leaving care are at such a disadvantage because, one, they're leaving at a younger age than the national average. Two, they have to access state subsidies where there's high levels of discrimination against those state subsidies. And then three, they're accessing a really competitive market, you know, and have all those odds stacked against them. So people leaving care, you know, they go into private rented, they're trying to find accommodation. They're not going to have an awareness to their rights in these provisions, which makes them very vulnerable to have their rights encroached by landlords who can evidently see they're very vulnerable. And, you know, the risk of homelessness is quite high. And I guess when, you know, TUSLA will say that, you know, most young people move on successfully, But I would really be concerned for the young people who are moving into private rented, because they're probably going to be cohorts that are experiencing the issues that I've talked about, such as overcrowding and poor standards. And they also won't have an awareness of their rights and how to seek recourse through, the Residential Tenancies Board and stuff. So, like, in terms of moving into private rented and determining that a successful move on, the interim of moving a young person into private rented and it being a success, in the interim, yes, that could be termed successful, but I'm really interested to know what happens to that young person longitudinally. What happens if they face an eviction notice? Where do they go then? How do they get access to their rights? What services they're linking in with and stuff? So I definitely think we need to be thinking about how we consider what a successful move on is. Is it just going from A to B and then that's tick the box and we're done? Or is it long term that person is able to stay in safe, secure accommodation throughout their care leaver life and beyond, So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Aisling. And I suppose it's about, always having this open discussion and talking about the obvious obstacles that young people can face, and then the invisible obstacles that we don't always see ourselves. Just going from my own experience of working with children in care for years, it really hit me when I went into aftercare of the likes of a young person, a student, not being able to always have the option of digs, college digs, because if you don't have a foster placement to go back to at the weekends or holidays, it's not an option for you. And also from my own experience of renting when I was in college, having parents to co-sign a lease to be able to reassure a landlord that the lease is going to be kept up to. So it's always a piece that we need to explore. And I just put out to the rest of our panel if anyone would like to add to that piece. No, okay, that's fine. We have. Sorry.
And thanks, Ashley. Yeah, absolutely, Ashley, hitting on all the points there. Extremely valid, of course. But even a home is the most important thing, as we know, in terms of there's been several references to it, because life begins once you have that stable accommodation in terms of long-term tenancies and support and things like that. That's crucial. But it's not just about the home, it's about the connectivity. I think Damien Hernan even referenced that earlier in his piece there, in terms of that's connectivity to the community and what supports are there that gives that longevity, Aisling, as you referred to there. That's what is important. The isolation is a big piece, and we're very conscious of that. Like I know we were speaking about the CAS program for a cohort of our young care leavers who require those additional supports. That's only a very small piece of the jigsaw in terms of the pathway to long-term stable accommodation. It's a small piece of the work. Like we're going in, like aftercare services. I suppose my view would be that it's relatively in its infancy in terms of a service provided, service provision for aftercare. But it is a transitional model of support towards living independently. That's what the aftercare service is. So you're working on that. Like I remember doing a presentation, an EPIC presentation in 2014 in Dublin there, and there was 1,600 young people availing of services at that time, and we had 44 33 aftercare workers in 2012, but we 44 in 2014. We now have a very skilled, creative bunch of aftercare workers and dedicated aftercare teams nationally. We have a dedicated team in each operational area in TUSLA that is headed by an aftercare, a very experienced aftercare, and a lot of those workers are around, and many of those managers are around many years going back, and a lot of them have come in recently. We now have just touching on 140 aftercare workers with holding dedicated caseloads. So we have a very dedicated, creative bunch out there that work over and above in terms. In the early days, many of those workers would be treading the roads and the streets and up and down, like asking about the, trying to get those properties before, the private market gets in there, and much of the time was spent treading those roads with deposits in hand, trying to queue up to get a property. We've come a long way since then. We've a lot to do, but we've come a long way in terms of where we are with now. but it's not just about the home, it's that connectivity within the community and the supports. I mentioned earlier that it goes back to that, like it's very clear that the planning for leaving care, you're talking about that early planning, but the planning for leaving care actually commences when the young person enters care. That's when the planning starts. It doesn't, it's only the formal planning starts at 16 and a half when the referral to aftercare service commands, and you have the assessment of need and the aftercare plan, but you know, it's the interagency steering committee where not all young people are referred to that committee. It's complex needs and things like that, but you wouldn't have the capacity to take 2,900 young people. But in 2014 we had 1,600 young people, and I made a call out to EPIC at that time for young people: get involved, take up the supports. And we're thrilled with the take up on that. Like, children in care have been coming down, but aftercare availability, those young people have gone up over the years. So we're thrilled with that. But we'll work in terms of stretch whatever resources that we have to maximize those resources to make sure that we get the best support services available for a young person. That's what TUSLA continue to do and committed to do. And we continuously identify what gaps or what further resources we need to deliver whatever supports is arising into the future. And that accommodation framework, we're working towards a 5-year strategy now where we have an agreed model, accommodation framework model that we want to work toward, because every young person at a particular point in their lives has a particular accommodation need. And whatever that point is, it would be nice to have that path identified through that accommodation framework. And it's not just about nice, that's our goal. We have a mandate to do that. TUSLA is not an accommodation provider, as I mentioned in the piece earlier, but there's a huge commitment to ensure, as part of the aftercare service division, that transitional model of support is there to make sure that there's a secure, stable accommodation in place for that young person, and the young person supported to achieve that, as well as education and protection and everything like that. So I don't know if that's kind of touches, I think it touches on a lot of what you were saying, Aisling, and I think Pat will have something to say on that as well, in terms of the roles that our partner providers provide as well.
It was, see, I come at it from a very rights-based perspective, but I do appreciate in your previous video that you did with Danielle, that you guys said that you're really working on making sure that you connect the CAS properties to communities, because I think that's really important, you know, particularly like when we were doing some kind of brainstorming and stuff like that for the accommodation webinar, it did come up about the idea of displacement and what moving people from their communities maybe into a different county and what that might do to a person, you know, in terms of their sense of connection and sense of belonging. So there's so much to think of on the practical rights-based level, but also on the more emotional, connected, and like, you know, feeling a sense of belonging. Yeah, that like, you know, they're kind of twofold. There's so much to consider.
Yeah, and I suppose there on the right space, just to put my EPIC hat on, obviously to let people know that concern around, you're so right, Aisling and I always felt that getting secure accommodation for a young person is a necessity, but it's only the first step, because after that it's gaining those skills of being able to live on their own, as Pat had mentioned as well in their presentation, because it's so new. And if you have a young person coming from residential care, and especially if they've been in a residential home for a number of years, they're not always used to being in their own company, and they're not used to the noises of the house settling around them and neighbours, and there's always staff for young people around. So it's always just a first step. The housing is just a first step, and then the support after that. But obviously EPIC is there as a support and as a children's rights organisation to support anyone who would be concerned about their housing rights. And as William mentioned as well, we have the aftercare services that are there as well, and the drop-in services that are so important now for young people to be able to engage in as well. But William, if I could just go back to you about one question that came up, that somebody's asking about who to go to or how they would find out more information about CAS itself.
Yeah, the point of it, well, you can contact me at any time, of course, or at Pat or any of the HBs or that. But the point, a good point of contact is actually whichever local aftercare service the young person is linked in with. Do you know what I mean? The aftercare service there, their aftercare worker, their aftercare manager, they're all very much in tune to and briefed in terms of what the program is, and they're working really hard within their local areas. Not all local areas have actually CAS properties yet, but doesn't mean they're not working hard to attain those presently. So that's the best point of contact. But of course, I'm available at any time to take any cause in that. But their aftercare manager or aftercare worker is also best placed.
Brilliant, thanks, William. And Pat, I might go over to yourself if that's okay. I suppose just again what we were talking about, that support piece of getting a home for somebody is so important, but the next steps that I suppose you are the experts in about how to secure and support the person in that new home.
Yeah, thank you for letting me come in. Yeah, well, firstly, just to address some of what Ashton was talking about, we moved. We supported 1,300 people last year in the trust to get their own home. The vast majority of them got it through by way of HAP, the housing assistance payment. And Ashton's right. I mean, although it answered their immediate need, the private rented market is always vulnerable. It's less vulnerable at the moment because we're not competing with multinational companies. As you saw today in the news, for example, Kerry Group are letting some people go. But by and large, when we will be working in Kildare, we will be competing with the Kerry Group when they'll be bringing over people from Israel and people from America to get accommodation. We'll be going up against them and trying to land that accommodation. So the market's got a bit easier at the moment, but that'll, once the economy kicks back in again, that'll tighten up. I suppose when we look at our housing plan in the trust at the moment, 56% of our target at the moment is private rented and 44% is either acquisitions or new builds. So we want to flip that in the next couple of years. And our next strategic plan, it's around getting more and more CAS, getting more and more new builds, more and more acquisitions, because that gives the security to the tenant that Ashling was talking about. That means the unit won't be sold from under them. You know, they won't be asked to leave. The trust doesn't use the word eviction, for example. So the best type of accommodation is a social housing accommodation with an approved housing body or a local authority, and we need to do more of that. And as myself and William talked about earlier in the presentation, we want to ramp it up now so that we can give more and more people access to CAS in their own area or their area of choice. And that's really what we want to do with the aftercare committees. The young person can say, you know, well, I actually don't want to live in Tullamore, even though I'm from Tullamore. You know, I remember talking to a young person from Ballinrobe, nothing against Ballinrobe now, you know, but he said to me, it wouldn't matter how nice the unit was in Ballinrobe. People have made up their mind about me in Ballinrobe. I'll never get a chance, you know, to show them how much I've grown and matured and, you know, and so on. So the young person has to be able to be given options for that unit. And then our job with William and others is to ramp up the units and get those units in those areas. There was a question I saw on the thing there from a young person, Adele, if that's okay to say.
Yeah.
They asked, like, is CAS available with people with intellectual disabilities? And we have units at the moment for people who have come up through care but have a disability as well. And I know that we're not the only provider who's doing that, but you know, we want to give a CAS unit to as many people as possible, but specifically for people who have particular needs, who might struggle with a landlord and might struggle in the private rental market. They're the ones that need to be prioritised, you know, if there's a shortage. So the answer to that question, if they're still on the line, I see there's 93 people still on the line now. If you're one of those who asked that question, then yes is the answer. You know, we definitely want to be giving you a CAS unit, because that way, yeah, you know, beyond 23, beyond 25, you will have the support of an approved housing body. And I know we're not the only ones who would do that. But, you know, I don't have much more time either today. I'm sure we're coming to a close. But what I want to say that in our next 5-year strategic plan that will be launched later this year with the Housing Minister, I hope, you will see that the Peter McVerry Trust, like Focus Ireland and Don Bosco's and all the other providers, will be ramping up the amount of CAS that's available. And I would love to get to a stage, and I'd say this to all the panelists, where we're providing more CAS than private rented markets. So that's the goal, to flip it, that the vast majority of people are getting a CAS unit rather than a private rented unit. So they have security of choice right up into the future. And that's the challenge over the next 5 years, ramp it up.
Can I come in there for a second?
Yes.
I know myself and Pat, and we're all very excited about the CAS properties for care leavers. Like, CAS is around 40 years. It's around since 2017 for care leavers as a priority group that can now avail of CAS properties. But I'd be remiss now. I can see the aftercare managers around the country kind of jumping up and down, because CAS is not the only option. It's a small piece of the jigsaw, very, very small. We have a joint protocol, a 2014 joint protocol with the TUSLA, with the local authorities, that's in operation within our interagency steering committees. That brings in the resources available from the local authorities, which brings in HAP, which brings in all those other options. One thing CAS has helped, all right, though, is that it's raised the profile of our care leavers out there. And as a result of that, other housing options have opened up in those discussions with local authorities and that. And our managers are constantly sitting on various groups, and the local authorities sit on the interagency steering groups as well. So CAS is not the only show in town. It's a small piece of it, and it's a small piece of that jigsaw in terms of when we work towards that agreed accommodation framework that I mentioned earlier.
Brilliant, thanks, William. And I'm just conscious of time, so I've a question for John that came in, and for Danielle as well. So John, I'll go to you, give Danielle your voice a rest after the last hour. I suppose it was noted that the research piece you did was at the start of the first COVID lockdown, which we all thought was going to be 2 weeks at the time, and we're here a year later. And the question is, if you were to do your research piece again a year later where we are in lockdown, would you expect the same results?
Unfortunately not, Hidel. I think there's a lot more issues, and I think we're seeing that on the ground. You would notice within it as well as in the advocacy role. I think certainly access was only being touched on the first time around, and I think that's a huge issue at this stage for young people in the residential centres. I'm not so sure as well about how well young people are actually managing themselves in the units at this stage, and the staff as well. The issues that were there the last time of staff being very stressed about trying to do homeschooling and not having breaks, just going from home to work, is certainly more exacerbated this time around. I would think there would be far more, and like you were saying, I think the last time we thought it was going to be a one-off sort of thing, going to be short term. We'd be able to seek it out for maybe 6 weeks to 2 months, and then hopefully that will be the end of it. I think this time it is harder for people. The routines that people had the last time may not be working this time around either. I would feel, unfortunately, that the results will be far more dramatic this time around and far more concerning for everybody as well.
Yeah, I've feeling it in all of us as well. Probably got to see results, because it's a hard time, and to be a year later in the restrictions that they are. But I suppose just to know again from your research, which we were delighted to receive, was just how positive the feedback was from staff members of how well young people were coping and being able, and some of them actually enjoyed just not having.
I think what really shone through was that the young people were all clubbing together, and they knew that this was a national sort of emergency, that it wasn't just these young people themselves, that it wasn't just young people in care for once that were being singled out and that were feeling the stigma around that this was, the whole country was in shutdown, the whole country was in lockdown, and everybody was pulling together. And I think that would still stand today. I think that part certainly would. It's just that the boredom and the issues are there. But I still think the resilience that the young people have shown, and the staff and the managers as well, was absolutely fantastic. I would still expect that to be there. but because it's going on for longer this time, there doesn't seem to be any end in sight. You know, the schools haven't gone back at this stage. I think the issues will be there, but the resilience and incredibly positive, and it was great to see all of those coming in. And the other really encouraging part was kind of having contact with all of the residential centres for ourselves as well. And I suppose the really positive thing, and this came through on 3 or 4, is that when all of this is over, and please God will happen shortly, and this has been put to TUSLA and it has been well received, is that there should be some sort of day for all of the young people in the residential centres. A sports day, a fun day, a picnic, a big massive event that all of the young lads in the residential centres and the staff and managers can all get involved in, and just celebrate again and celebrate care. And I think that's a lovely idea and something that certainly we have to hang on to at this stage as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Danielle, yourself, if your voice is back from all your hard work emceeing, I suppose this is very specific to from a child's perspective, being in care. So the question was, what advice would you give to a young person who's struggling to settle into a new placement?
Basically, to keep in touch with your friends, and use the supports that are there for you. It is, I'm not going to lie to you, I'm not going to beat you around the bush. It is going to be lonely, and it is going to be different. And it is going to take time for you to settle in and to get your surroundings and to get used to this new environment that you're building for yourself. But it's just contact. Just keep in contact with people and don't isolate yourself. If there's a problem, no matter if it's too big or too small, like what Pa said in the interview, someone didn't know how to turn on the immersion. I didn't use my dishwasher here for a year because there was just too many buttons on it, and it was only until I got the manual out and I was sick of washing dishes. So it's just little things like that it is going to take time, and it is going to be scary, but you're not alone. There is support, and to just have make sure you have a strong support system around, because you're going to have high days, you're going to have low days, you're going to stress about not having a matching pair of socks in the house. So just keep talking, and don't feel alone.
Brilliant. Don't feel alone. Thanks so much, Danielle. But guys, I'm going to say thank you so much. There's loads of questions and comments coming in, and we'll do our best to try and get back to everybody. But we are going to have to wrap it up. But before we do, I just want to thank everyone again. It's, we really do appreciate people coming and giving their time. It's a difficult time, as John was saying, during a pandemic, and we really appreciate you coming for the support. So thanks again to William and to Pat, and special thanks to Aisling for being here, but also as part of our accommodation committee, and helping myself and Caroline put all this together, to John for his research. I also want to thanks, of course I don't have this in front of me, there we go. So making sure that I'm also thanking, I don't miss anyone else, out the Epic Youth Council members, so Dylan and Angel for their piece as well. But also we want to give a big shout out to Jessica Duffy. Without her, we wouldn't have got this webinar off the ground either. So thanks so much, Jess. To our Ombudsperson for Children again, Dr Niall Muldoon, to Damien Hernan, the Interim Director of Oberstown, again for his piece. And then a big shout out to Daffodil Care Services, to Smiley Trust, and to the young people and children in Orchard Fostering Services for giving their pieces and their contributions as well. And I'm sure, last but not least, everyone will join me in to say well done, and a huge thanks to Danielle, who played a blinder today as our MC. And it's so difficult for me as a 40-year-old woman to be coming on here and to be doing this without the energy of everybody in a room together. It's not natural to be apart, and it's so hard to do it. And I just think you're amazing. Everyone else thinks you're amazing, and we want to say a big thank you for giving your time today for it as well. So now that's all for me, and I'm going to hand you over to Epic CEO Marissa Ryan, who's going to do a closing piece for all the webinars this week.
Thanks, Adele. Hi everyone, I'm Marissa. I'm the new CEO of Epic. And while Adele has already thanked all the people we need to, I think it would be really remiss of me not just to acknowledge again our Youth Council, who did such an amazing job preparing and presenting all of the different webinars that have taken place so far this week. Those young people are the epitome of why we should celebrate care. This is the last of our webinars to celebrate Care Week. There's been 6 of them. I joined the organisation and was completely overwhelmed at the amount of work and preparation that was going into them. But I think everybody who's been attending this week can really see the height of professionalism and the real effort and enthusiasm that the organisation has put into making sure that this Care Week went virtual and still reached as many, if not more people as we would normally have were we not in the situation of a global pandemic. I'd particularly also like to acknowledge and thank Terry Dignan, who's our outgoing CEO of EPIC. And Terry has just been an absolutely tireless champion for the rights of children and young people in care and aftercare. And I think he has been such a thoughtful and wise and kind leader for EPIC, and that the organisation has been immensely lucky to have him for the last 4 years. And we'll miss you a lot, Terry. In conclusion, because we're really out of time, I think the level of participation that has occurred over the 6 webinars that have taken place since Monday shows how much interest and support and concern is out there for children and young people in care and aftercare. So it's really up to EPIC to harness this and to move into a much deeper and more serious reflection in partnership with all of you on how to build a better and more robust care system. I think we would really encourage you to continue to reach out to us, to think about ways that we can support you in your various professions and in your various places, and to act in a real spirit of partnership, because we are in this together. And I think everybody who's attended, and it's been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who've attended the webinars this week, has shown through their questions, through their engagement with the panels, and in all the different ways they've supported us, that there is a desire to really get involved. So please do continue to work with us. We know that together, children in care with the right support and services have the ability to reach extraordinary potential and are already doing that. So on Care Day on Friday, please join our social media campaign at #CareDay21. There's still loads of events that you can attend on the day if you check out careday.org. And that's about it. So thank you again, and happy Care Week, and look forward to Care Day together. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Adele.
Thanks so much.
Take care now. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Well done.
Bye. All.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thanks a million, everybody.